The night shift was unusually quiet. Monitors hummed. Fluorescent lights stayed steady. The nurse at the far desk kept her head down, charting unnoticed, someone the staff assumed would be home by now. Her phone vibrated once, a message she did not open. Down the corridor, a security door clicked when it should not have. She looked up, not alarmed, not curious, just alert. Whatever was about to happen, this was not her first time being told she did not belong, and they were wrong again. The hospital at night had a different weight to it. Not louder, not darker, just heavier, like every sound mattered more because there were fewer of them. She arrived 10 minutes early as she always did, same entrance, same badge swipe, same nod to the security guard who barely looked up. To him she was routine, dependable, replaceable. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. The night shift was already settling into its slow rhythm, monitors humming, carts rolling softly, voices kept low out of habit more than policy. She tied her hair back, washed her hands, and pulled on gloves with practiced calm. No one asked about her day. No one ever did. At the nurse's station, the charge nurse handed her the assignment without ceremony. A short-staffed wing, high-dependency patients, but nothing dramatic on paper. "You're good here," the charge nurse said, already turning away. Not praise, just relief. She logged in, reviewed charts, noted medication windows, ventilation settings, allergies. Her eyes moved quickly, efficiently. She noticed things others missed, not because she tried to, but because her mind refused to skim. A vibration buzzed once against her leg, her phone. She did not check it right away. She finished charting first, confirmed vitals, adjusted an IV flow by a fraction that most would not bother correcting. Only then did she step back, remove her gloves, and glance at the screen. A family group photo filled the preview. Balloons, a banner, 25 in silver foil. Her twin stood in the center, smiling, surrounded by relatives, everyone dressed well, everyone looking warm, wanted. The message above the photo was short, from her mother. "We thought it was better if you stayed home. Nobody wants awkwardness tonight." She read it once, then locked the phone. No reaction showed on her face. If there was something sharp behind her eyes, it passed quickly. She slipped the phone into her pocket and returned to the screen in front of her. A patient coughed behind the curtain. She was there in seconds. "Easy," she said quietly, adjusting the bed. Her voice was steady, neutral, the kind of voice people trusted without knowing why. The patient relaxed. Down the corridor, laughter drifted briefly from the break room. Someone's birthday, someone else's life. She moved methodically from room to room, checking, adjusting, documenting. Other staff came and went around her, making small talk, complaining about schedules, trading stories about weekends and dinners and plans. No one asked her what she was doing after her shift. The assumption was already made. Around midnight, the hospital settled further. Lights dimmed slightly. The building exhaled. This was the hour where mistakes happened, not from panic, but from comfort. She felt it before she saw it. A pause. A subtle absence where something should have been. She stopped walking and looked back toward the security door at the end of the hall. It was closed, it was always closed, but the indicator light was off. She stared at it for a moment longer than necessary. Then she continued walking. At the nurse's station, a junior nurse struggled with a malfunctioning monitor. She stepped in without comment, adjusted a setting, and walked away. The monitor stabilized. "Thanks," the nurse said, surprised. She nodded once. In her pocket, her phone buzzed again. Another photo, cake this time, candles lit, applause frozen in pixels. She did not look. Instead, she opened a supply cabinet and took inventory from memory. Gauze, saline, emergency kits, one missing, one newly restocked, one placed half an inch off where it should be. Her expression did not change. She wrote a note in the system, nothing dramatic, just a timestamp, just a detail. At 12:17 a.m., somewhere deeper in the building, a door clicked softly. Too softly. She looked up, her posture shifted, not visibly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but something aligned inside her. Attention narrowing, awareness sharpening. She was still just a nurse. Still the one who had been told to stay home. Still the one no one expected to matter tonight. She picked up her clipboard and walked toward the sound, calm and unhurried. Whatever was coming did not know her. And that was its first mistake. The corridor looked the same as it always did. Clean floors, pale walls, directional signs bolted in place years ago and never questioned since. The kind of environment that trained people to stop looking and start assuming. She did not assume. Her footsteps were quiet, measured, not cautious, controlled. She paused at intersections without appearing to pause, letting reflections in glass panels tell her what was ahead before she committed to a direction. Nothing obvious. That was the problem. At the end of the corridor, the security door's access panel blinked once and went dark again. No alarm, no warning, just absence. She stopped beside a medication cart and pretended to review a chart. Her eyes tracked everything. The door, the ceiling camera above it angled slightly lower than it had been earlier, the floor cleaned recently but with a faint scuff where a heavy sole had turned. She catalogued it without emotion. Someone had been here, recently. And they knew how to move without drawing attention. A voice drifted down the hall, 2 orderlies talking softly as they pushed a bed toward radiology. Normal, familiar. She waited until they passed, then continued. At the nurse's station, she logged into a terminal and checked the security feed she was technically not assigned to monitor. The password came to her fingers without thought. Most cameras showed exactly what they should. One did not. The feed near the service stairwell lagged by half a second, then corrected itself. It was subtle, easy to miss. She noted the timestamp. A junior doctor leaned over the counter nearby, scrolling on his phone. "Quiet night," he said more to himself than to her. She did not answer. Instead, she asked, "Who authorized maintenance access to the lower stairwell?" He frowned. "Maintenance, not tonight." She nodded once and turned away as if that settled it. In her pocket, her phone vibrated again. This time she did not ignore it. She stepped into an empty supply room, closed the door behind her and glanced at the screen. A message from her sister. "Wish you were here." No punctuation, no explanation. She locked the phone and slid it back into her pocket. For a brief moment, no more than a breath, she stood still. Then she exhaled slowly and grounded herself back in the room. Shelves, labels, inventory counts, order. She adjusted her gloves and stepped back into the corridor. A patient call light flashed 3 rooms down. She responded immediately, helping an elderly man reposition, checking his oxygen line, listening to his breathing longer than necessary. "You're very calm," he said quietly. "So are you," she replied. She left the room and closed the curtain carefully. At the far end of the hall, a shadow moved where no one should have been. It disappeared before anyone else noticed. She changed direction without signaling it. Her pace remained unhurried, but her path shifted subtly, placing walls at her back, exits within reach, blind spots minimized. Near the service elevator, she found a trash bin out of place. Not knocked over, not disturbed, just moved 6 inches closer to the wall. Someone had needed room to pass. She reached for her radio and stopped herself. Too soon. Instead, she documented another note. Another timestamp. Another small irregularity buried among routine entries. At 12:31 a.m., the fire door near the ICU clicked. This time she heard it clearly. She approached the door slowly, posture relaxed, one hand resting casually against the wall. Anyone watching would see a nurse on rounds, nothing more. She placed her palm flat against the door. Cold, recently opened. From the other side came the faintest sound, fabric brushing fabric. A controlled breath, not a patient. She stepped back just as a man rounded the corner at the far end of the hall. He wore hospital scrubs, blue, correct badge placement, neutral expression, too neutral. They made eye contact for half a second. He nodded politely. She returned the nod. He walked past her without breaking stride, pushing an empty wheelchair. She watched him go, memorizing the way he carried his weight. Balanced, efficient, alert without appearing so. When he turned the corner, she moved, not after him, toward the ICU desk. She leaned in and spoke quietly to the charge nurse. "Lock down ICU access for equipment recalibration." Quietly. The charge nurse hesitated. "That's not..." "Please," she said, calm, firm, no explanation. Something in her tone ended the discussion. The charge nurse made the call. Lights above ICU doors shifted subtly, access restricted. Down the hall, the man in scrubs stopped walking. She did not see it, but she knew. This was no longer a series of coincidences. This was preparation, and whatever was coming was already inside the building. The hospital did not announce the change. It never did. There was no siren, no alarm, no overhead voice calling for calm, just a gradual tightening, doors taking longer to open, elevators pausing between floors, staff sensing that something had shifted without being told what it was. She felt it immediately. At the ICU desk, monitors hummed in steady rhythm. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency, but their voices had lowered. Eyes lingered a second too long on corridors, on corners. She stood near the wall, reviewing charts she already knew by memory. The man in blue scrubs had not reappeared. That worried her more than if he had. A stretcher burst through the ER doors at the far end of the wing. Paramedics shouting vitals, blood on gloves, controlled chaos, real, unplanned, urgent. She moved automatically, assisting without drawing attention. Her hands were steady, her questions precise. She watched the paramedics as much as the patient. One of them avoided her eyes. Another wore boots that were not standard issue. She caught the charge nurse's gaze and gave a single, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Not now. The patient was rushed into surgery, the doors sealed. The noise receded, leaving behind the familiar hum of machines and something else beneath it. A vibration, low, rhythmic, helicopter rotors. The sound grew louder, closer. Not the usual med-evac approach. Too fast, too direct. People began to notice. A junior resident looked up. "That's not scheduled." She said nothing. She was already walking, toward the service corridor, toward the loading access that connected the hospital to the outside world without ceremony. As she passed a window, she saw it. A dark helicopter dropping altitude with controlled aggression. No visible medical markings. Its lights were minimal, functional. The kind designed to be seen only by those expecting it. It touched down hard on the restricted pad. Security personnel moved into position, confused, reactive, outpaced. The doors of the helicopter slid open. Men disembarked, not soldiers in parade form. No insignia, no visible rank, just dark uniforms, helmets clipped but not worn, weapons slung but not raised, professional restraint, the wrong kind to ignore. She stopped at the corner just out of sight and listened. Boots on concrete. Short commands spoken quietly. The sound of equipment being handed off. This was not a raid, it was a retrieval. Her phone vibrated again. She did not look at it. Instead, she reached into her locker, one she technically shared, though no one else ever used it, and removed a small laminated card tucked behind spare gloves. She studied it for a brief second. Then she slid it back where it had been. Not yet. The men entered through the service doors with assistance from hospital security who clearly did not understand what they were facilitating. Authority moves easily when it does not raise its voice. She stepped into view. One of the men noticed her immediately. His posture changed, not hostile, not aggressive, alert. He looked at her badge, then at her face. For a fraction of a second his eyes narrowed, recognition or assessment. He turned to his team and gave a subtle hand signal. They slowed. "Restricted area," a security guard said, trying to sound firm. The man in front produced paperwork. Real, correct, overwhelming. The guard stepped aside. She met the man's eyes as he passed her. Nothing was said, but something unspoken settled between them, an awareness that neither was what they appeared to be. The team moved deeper into the hospital, heading toward the ICU, toward the locked doors. They stopped when the access panel denied them entry. The man turned. This time he looked directly at her. "Who authorized the lockdown?" he asked. His tone was neutral, controlled, but it carried weight. She did not answer immediately. Around them, staff pretended to work, pretended not to listen. Fear moved quietly through the space. "I did," she said finally. The man studied her, from her shoes to her posture to the way she held her shoulders, relaxed but ready. "You're a nurse," he said. "Yes, we're on a time-sensitive operation." "So am I." A pause, not confrontation, calibration. "What's your name?" he asked. She gave it. He repeated it once, testing how it sounded in his mouth. Then he said, "Open the doors." "No." Another pause, longer this time. Behind him, one of the operators shifted his stance, hand brushing his rifle without touching it. She noticed, she always noticed. "There are patients inside," she said calmly, "and one of them is not yours." The man's eyes sharpened. "You're very confident for someone out of your clearance." She leaned in slightly, not threatening, just enough to lower her voice. "You landed without medical authorization," she said. "Your entry path was compromised before you reached the building. And you have someone inside who already failed to move unseen." Silence. The helicopter rotors wound down outside. The man exhaled slowly. "Who are you?" he asked. She did not answer. Instead, she reached for the access panel, not to open it, to lock it down further. The lights above the ICU doors shifted again. Red. For the first time the man smiled, not because he was amused, because he understood. This was no longer a simple operation. The ICU corridor smelled of antiseptic and tension. Machines hummed a steady, neutral rhythm, indifferent to the storm gathering outside and inside. Staff moved carefully, speaking in low tones, eyes darting toward the service entrance where the helicopter team had landed. She walked deliberately between the beds, hands bare, clipboard tucked under one arm. No one flinched. They barely registered her presence, but she noticed every subtle reaction, every shift in posture, every suppressed question. She was not here to participate in the panic. She was here to control it. Through the reinforced glass doors she spotted them, the team of operatives who had landed moments ago. Their movements were precise, trained, yet restrained, like predators testing a new environment, not intruding. They had not yet crossed the threshold, waiting for clearance or perhaps testing for resistance. One of them, the apparent leader, approached the access panel. His hand hovered above the keypad. Her fingers brushed hers across the console. "Access is restricted," she said softly but firmly. He met her eyes, calm, professional, expectant. "You are aware of the patient inside," she continued. "The one flagged for non-standard procedure." He nodded once, no words. "Then you understand why I won't allow entry," she said. Her voice remained even measured, every syllable carrying authority without volume. A junior nurse passed them, pushing a cart with medication. The operative did not flinch, did not react to the intrusion, but her awareness caught the subtle shift in his stance, the imperceptible tightening of his shoulders, the micro-adjustment in how he distributed weight. He was calculating, assessing, evaluating. She activated the internal calm, speaking only to the access panel and the internal ICU network. Commands were concise, surgical. The doors locked tighter. The red light glowed ominously. The leader of the team exhaled lightly. He turned to the others, hand gestures quick, silent. They shifted forward, encircling the panel without alarming anyone else. Precision, not aggression. "Step back," she said, not loud, not threatening, just clear. He froze for the briefest moment, then complied. But his eyes never left hers. They were testing boundaries, curiosity mixed with caution. She did not move her hands, did not blink, did not betray the calculation running in her mind. She knew what they were trained to do. She knew what they would attempt next, and she had prepared contingencies for each possibility. A nurse's pager buzzed faintly from the corner. The sound, insignificant to most, signaled a complication to her. The patient had spiked, heart rate irregular. The team's quiet advance could compromise stabilization. She glanced at the monitors, calm, steady, analyzing, every decision measured against lives depending on her. She made the call in a single breath, a single motion. The leader's head tilted slightly, a silent acknowledgement of competence. "You're not what you appear," he said finally. "I never was," she replied. The operative's hand hovered near his radio. She noted the microsecond delay before he spoke, before he verified orders. A tactical mind assessing whether to challenge her or comply. A sudden alarm from the central monitor drew her attention. Another patient, a critical one, showing signs of sudden deterioration. The team glanced at her, instinctively calculating whether they could assist. She gestured once, minimal, precise. They wait. She moved toward the bed, adjusting tubing, checking vitals, giving commands only she could give. She was fast, efficient, exact. The operatives watched, learning without intrusion. Then from behind the glass doors a third figure emerged, someone neither she nor the team had anticipated. Security, confused, panicked, attempting to intercept the operatives. Time slowed. Every microsecond mattered, every step calculated. She raised one hand, calm, controlled, authority unquestioned. The security officer froze. The leader of the team tilted his head, recognition flickering across his face. They were in a delicate equilibrium now, tension unspoken but palpable. One misstep could escalate, yet she held it in perfect balance. She did not raise her voice, she did not draw a weapon. She did not shout orders, but the message was unmistakable. She was in charge. The team stepped back, security hesitated. The corridor became a frozen tableau of restraint, calculation, and quiet power. She exhaled once, not relief, not satisfaction, awareness, assessment, control. Outside, the helicopter rotors had stopped. Inside, she had won the first battle without striking a blow. But she knew this was only the beginning. A low vibration in her pocket reminded her of the incoming call, another layer of complication. She ignored it, focusing on the immediate threat, managing humans as dangerous as any weapon. This confrontation was not a fight, it was a test, and she had passed. For now, the hallway remained still, too still. Machines hummed, monitors blinked, footsteps paused, eyes watched. And she, underestimated by all, held the quiet center of power. The ICU corridor was no longer just a passage, it had become a chessboard. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of light mattered. Claire Mercer moved along it with the same calm precision she had mastered in far more dangerous environments than any hospital ward. Here, her underestimation was a weapon she wielded as deftly as any firearm. The team of special ops personnel had not left. They lingered, calculating. Their presence was silent, professional, but probing. Every angle of the corridor, every patient bed, every staff member had been evaluated in seconds. Claire had noted it all. She allowed their analysis to proceed while she prepared her own. From the service entrance, she retrieved a tablet and opened the hospital's internal monitoring systems. Cameras, access logs, patient vitals, all overlaid on the floor plan. The patterns were subtle, but she could see them. Movements that didn't belong, hands that lingered where they shouldn't, equipment requests that had no justification. Her fingers traced the path of one suspicious figure, maintenance staff, not malicious, yet. But curious, testing boundaries. She made mental notes. The operative leader watched her every move, curious, cautious. He had seen her manage the first confrontation without aggression, without a single raised voice, yet with authority that could not be denied. She was not a threat to be confronted. She was a tactical variable to be respected. She tapped into the central control panel, locking certain doors, creating safe zones around critical patients. Not a single alarm was triggered. This was subtle power, invisible authority. "Adjust patient flow," she said softly, addressing the nurses nearby. They obeyed instantly, almost instinctively, as if guided by some unseen hand. The special ops leader inclined his head. Recognition flickered again. He spoke quietly into his radio, then signaled the others. They began repositioning, not advancing, aligning themselves with her silent commands. Claire did not glance up. She didn't need to. She had already mapped the corridor, estimated response times, calculated variables for both human and mechanical movement. The helicopters, ambulances, and security personnel outside the ICU were all part of this larger tactical equation. A beep from a patient monitor snapped her attention. One of the trauma patients was deteriorating faster than predicted. She moved immediately, performing procedures, adjusting equipment, administering medication with precision that only years of both medical and tactical training could allow. The team observed quietly. Not a single intervention, not yet. They had learned restraint. They had learned to wait. But they were ready. She had established control, but she knew the situation could escalate at any second. Another complication arose. A group of paramedics brought in a patient from a nearby accident site. The transfer team was unprepared, disorganized, uncertain. Claire intercepted before they reached the ER bays. "Step back," she instructed, calm, unyielding. "Secure the stretcher, no entry until clearance is given." The paramedics complied immediately, almost startled at the firmness behind her ordinary nurse uniform. Even the operatives glanced briefly, an acknowledgement of her authority. She moved her attention to the security feed, seeing that someone had tried to bypass a restricted area. Claire tapped her calm again. "Contain, don't confront, follow protocol," the operative leader murmured, efficient, almost surgical. "Yes," she replied without looking at him. "Efficiency preserves lives, chaos does not." A sudden flicker in the monitors caught her eye. Another anomaly, someone moving with intent but undetected by hospital sensors. She tracked it mentally, calculating intercept points. The corridor was no longer just a hallway. It was a tactical grid, every step planned, every decision weighted. She positioned herself near the intersection of two hallways, patient monitors in sight, operatives subtly flanking her, nurses and med techs organized around key points. She exuded calm authority, the kind that demanded compliance without fear, without shouting, without threat. Then came the subtle shift she had anticipated. One of the operatives stepped forward, hand hovering near a door. Not aggression, testing boundaries, respectful challenge. She looked up finally, eyes meeting his, no words, just recognition. She moved to the door, pressed a sequence on the keypad, and the access light changed from red to green. The operative leader exhaled quietly, approving. "You control everything," he said softly. She didn't reply. She never needed to. Her focus remained on the patients, the monitors, the moving pieces around her. Her tactical shift was complete. She had converted the corridor from a potential threat zone into a controlled environment. A new alert sounded, a call from the helicopter team outside, a patient in critical condition. Claire touched her earpiece. "Prepare for immediate transfer. Trauma Protocol Alpha. Clear access routes. I will coordinate." Even the operatives followed her instructions. Subtle nods, silent compliance. No orders spoken loudly. No displays of force, just competence, just control. The corridor, the ICU, the floor, it all bent to her authority, quietly, invisibly, with lethal precision. And as she coordinated the next critical steps, she allowed herself a brief, measured thought. This was no longer just about underestimation. This was about survival, hers, the patient's, and those who had underestimated her. She had shifted the battlefield, and she would not relinquish it, not yet. The hospital's pulse had changed. What had begun as routine chaos was now a layered, intricate pressure test, and Claire Mercer could feel the weight of every movement, every decision, pressing against her calm. She walked the ICU floor again, not fast, not loud, but deliberately, like a predator surveying territory she already knew. The emergency elevator doors opened, and another wave of patients arrived, critical cases from a multi-vehicle collision reported minutes ago. Medics and nurses scrambled, but Claire's eyes tracked every step. She could see who would falter, who would hesitate, and she adjusted their path with the softest directions. Left bay, monitor vitals, stabilize first. A nurse pivoted instinctively, no questions asked. Her attention snapped to a flicker on the monitors, a patient whose vitals were swinging dangerously, irregular but subtle enough that no one else had noticed. She moved to them, hands precise, confident, every action measured. The operative team observed from a respectful distance, watching her as she adjusted IV lines, administered medication, and stabilized the patient without raising her voice. Then the real complication arrived. A man in paramedic gear but unfamiliar pushed past the triage point. He had authorization, he claimed, but something about the way he moved, the quiet, calculated precision, set Claire's instincts on edge. She intercepted, placing a hand lightly on his arm. "Stop," she said calmly. Her eyes locked on his, sharp and unwavering. "Your clearance is invalid, step back." He paused, confused. Around them, staff hesitated. The operatives shifted but did not intervene. Claire noted the subtle tension in the stranger's posture, testing, probing, but not yet aggressive. That was a mistake he would not repeat. Without raising her voice, Claire activated the internal security feed. She triangulated his location, his movements, his access route. The system confirmed her suspicion: no legitimate clearance. Her fingers tapped rapidly on a tablet, locking doors behind him, channeling his approach into a controlled path. "You will comply," she said, measured, commanding, "or you will be escorted out. No exceptions." The man froze, realizing she controlled the space. He stepped back, raising his hands slightly, not in surrender but in acknowledgement. The operatives watched, impressed. This was not authority through threat. It was authority through precision, calculation, and quiet control. Claire exhaled softly and returned her attention to the patients. Another complication emerged: a power fluctuation. Monitors flickered briefly, alarms chimed, but the hospital's electrical systems had redundancies. She moved quickly, directing techs to reroute power, stabilize critical systems, and maintain patient care. Each instruction was precise, delivered calmly, executed immediately. A nurse approached, breathless. "Ma'am, Trauma 3 is overloaded. We need to move patients." Claire scanned the room mentally. Paths, timing, safety protocols. She gave a single directive: stagger transfers, 2 at a time, maintain vitals during move, notify me of any change in condition. As staff scrambled to comply, Claire noted a subtle movement behind a supply cart. A masked figure had slipped in unnoticed. She slowed, observed, then approached, steps silent, hands ready, posture relaxed but alert. The intruder hesitated under her gaze, and Claire's calm authority was enough. "Identify yourself. Now." No sudden moves, no panic, just recognition that she had command, even when the intruder assumed the element of surprise. The figure backed down, hands raised slightly, and retreated into the hall. Claire moved back to the central point of the floor, where the operative leader had been quietly observing. She caught his eye, and he gave a subtle nod: approval, acknowledgement, understanding. They were no longer just partners in observation. She had become the axis of control. Another alert arrived from the helipad outside: a critical patient en route, but weather conditions meant the landing zone would be compromised. Claire processed the information instantly: timing, approach, personnel, patient status. She coordinated the reroute with the helicopters, ensuring a safe landing point while maintaining ICU readiness. Even in the midst of escalating chaos, Claire remained the fulcrum. Every complication, unauthorized personnel, critical patients, power fluctuations, weather delays, was countered with calm, deliberate authority. And yet, a quiet moral tension weighed on her. She knew the intrusive figure had been testing limits, not outright dangerous, but the decision to detain or confront would have consequences. Choosing restraint was not weakness, it was calculated control. The cost of aggression was too high, and she had already paid attention to every ripple her actions would create. The hospital floor bent to her decisions, the operatives subtly aligned with her, the staff moved with silent precision, and even the most aggressive variables had been neutralized without incident. Claire's quiet competence had transformed the escalating complication into controlled reality. The storm outside the hospital was mirrored inside: sirens, alerts, constant motion, but through it all, Claire Mercer remained steady. She was underestimated, overlooked, invisible to those who didn't see beneath the surface. But in this moment she was the center of everything, and as the next patient wheels approached, she readied herself, not for confrontation but for the orchestration of survival, where every choice carried weight, and every life depended on subtle mastery of control. The stakes had escalated, the complication had arrived, and Claire Mercer's true authority had begun to silently reveal itself. The ICU floor had quieted only just. Patients stabilized, critical systems monitored, and the intruder discreetly removed, yet Claire Mercer's mind was already moving ahead. The storm outside had not abated. Emergency alerts pinged in the background, traffic accidents feeding into the hospital, helicopter calls still incoming. Each new crisis was a puzzle, each decision a moral calculus. Her gaze fell on a patient she had stabilized earlier, a young man with multiple fractures from a collision. His vitals were holding, but just barely. She knew moving him for a faster transfer might save another patient arriving in critical condition, yet risk his life. The operative leader glanced at her, expecting guidance, perhaps an order. Claire's hands hovered over the monitors, fingers poised. Every second counted. She felt the familiar tension of responsibility, the moral weight of a decision where no choice was without consequence. Move him and risk collapse. Keep him and risk another's death. Her choice was clear. She directed a team to maintain his position, stabilizing him further while redirecting other staff to incoming patients. It was restraint, not avoidance. The cost was subtle. Another patient would arrive slightly later, but Claire had calculated that all lives could be saved if protocols were followed meticulously. Her eyes scanned the floor, noting each movement, each alignment of personnel. The hospital had become a chessboard, and she had already anticipated several steps ahead. She whispered directives, soft but precise, never loud, never panicked. A sudden alert blared, an unauthorized entry into Trauma 2. Claire pivoted, her gaze sharp, calm but commanding. Through the hallway window, she saw a man trying to bypass security to access sensitive areas. The operatives moved instinctively, but Claire intercepted first. "Step back. You are out of your clearance," she said, voice low but immovable. Her authority was quiet but absolute. The intruder hesitated, then retreated under her steady gaze. She returned to her patient review, calculating risks, deciding which triage order would save the most lives. One nurse hesitated, unsure of which patient to prioritize. Claire knelt briefly beside her, pointing to a monitor. "This one first. Stabilize vitals, keep the airway clear." No argument, no hesitation. The nurse moved immediately. Outside, a storm of helicopters circled, waiting for clearance. A critical case, a child, was arriving imminently. Claire's attention shifted, a split-second assessment: trauma room capacity, staff allocation, airway management, med supply, and patient stabilization. All variables aligned in her mind. A colleague approached, almost whispering, "Ma'am, if we prioritize this patient, we risk the others." Claire didn't flinch. She tapped the tablet, rerouting some transfers, assigning teams with efficiency that bordered on surgical precision. "We minimize risk, we act fast, and we do not panic." She felt it then, the invisible weight of authority. The choice to intervene, to redirect resources, to calculate moral outcomes without bias. Her restraint was her weapon, her knowledge a shield. Every action carried the cost of life, but she bore it silently. A helicopter touched down outside, storm winds buffeting the doors. Claire coordinated the incoming team, guiding them step by step. Inside the hospital, every patient, every staff member moved like a single organism under her quiet orchestration. The operatives observed from a distance, noting the precision, the moral clarity. Claire could have taken aggressive action, could have demanded submission through force, but she didn't. Her sacrifice was not visible. She gave herself to the responsibility of every life in her care. She became both shield and strategist, balancing outcomes in a world that would never acknowledge her full authority. As the child was wheeled in, stabilized, and prepped for surgery, Claire allowed herself a brief, measured breath. The storm outside raged, but inside, control had been maintained. The moral choice had been made, quiet, calculated, and costly. No accolades, no recognition, just lives preserved under the discipline of a restrained hand. She returned to the ICU's central point, scanning every monitor, every corridor. Her mind noted patterns, risks, and small anomalies, always anticipating, always weighing the unseen consequences of each action. Her presence was invisible yet absolute. In this quiet command she found the paradox. True authority was not in fear, not in violence, but in moral clarity and precise intervention. She had chosen restraint. She had sacrificed personal visibility for operational success. And in doing so, she had ensured the survival of those who depended on her, without anyone ever realizing the magnitude of her decisions. Claire Mercer looked down a corridor filled with rushing staff, stabilized patients, and humming monitors. The storm was far from over, yet in her control the hospital functioned as it should. And as another alert lit the screen, she adjusted, planned, and prepared, knowing that her sacrifice was silent, her authority unrecognized, but absolute. She had faced escalation and complication, navigated moral decisions, and borne the weight of restraint. And though the world would not see, she remained steady, quiet, measured, indispensable. The hospital was no longer a building. It had become a battlefield of coordination, precision, and unseen threats. Outside, emergency sirens wailed in distant neighborhoods. Helicopters hovered, their lights slicing through the storm-dark sky. Inside, Claire Mercer moved through corridors with the same deliberate calm she had mastered over years, every step measured, every glance purposeful. A breach alert sounded in Trauma 3. A vehicle had arrived unannounced, its occupants refusing standard security protocols. Claire's gaze sharpened. The operatives glanced at her, uncertain if intervention would come from procedure or instinct. Claire did not hesitate. She approached the trauma bay silently, her presence alone commanding attention. The vehicle's doors opened and 2 paramedics stepped out with a stretcher, but behind them a third figure lurked, trying to slip past unnoticed. Claire's voice cut through the corridor, low and precise. "Stop, identify yourself." The figure froze. In that single moment, every observer in the hallway understood the power behind the calm tone. The paramedics looked to Claire for guidance, the intruder for escape, but neither path mattered. The man stepped back, hands raised, but there was a flicker of aggression in his eyes. He misjudged the quiet authority that radiated from the nurse-turned-strategist. Claire assessed his posture, weight distribution, and subtle micro-movements, the signs of training but not elite enough to match her own. Without raising her voice, she issued commands to the operatives. One flanked him, another secured the area, while she moved into position, calculating every angle, every possible action. The intruder's confidence wavered under the invisible pressure of Claire's presence. Suddenly, the paramedics realized the patient on the stretcher had been misreported. An armed accomplice had hidden beneath medical covers. Claire's eyes narrowed, but she didn't panic. Every operative knew their role, every corridor a planned line of defense. "Patient first, threat second," she instructed calmly. Her words carried authority, not panic. "Stabilize vitals, secure airway. I handle the rest." The intruder made a move, swift, impulsive. Claire anticipated, shifting her weight, moving with restrained speed. She intercepted without striking, guiding him gently but decisively into a corner, neutralizing his momentum. It was not violence, it was control. The operatives quickly restrained him, efficient and silent. Claire checked the patient, confirming vitals stable. Every breath, every heartbeat accounted for. No one was harmed. She had averted a disaster without the hospital ever realizing how close they had come to chaos. A helicopter alert indicated a secondary threat, a high-priority trauma requiring immediate airlift. Claire paused, scanning the entire floor, calculating staff allocation, resource distribution, and risk management. Every decision was a balance of life and procedure. "Coordinate bay clearance. Prep the child patient for extraction," she instructed. "Maintain lines of sight. No one leaves the perimeter unsecured." The operatives executed orders flawlessly, moving as extensions of her silent command. Claire's fingers hovered over communication devices, adjusting radio channels, confirming helicopter approach, checking weather interference, and routing teams with precision. As the extraction team entered, she paused to glance at her reflection in the window. A quiet, unassuming nurse, yet every line of her posture betrayed decades of training. The disguise was perfect, yet her authority was undeniable. The child was stabilized, transferred, and secured in the helicopter. Claire's mind calculated exit strategies, patient handoffs, and security sweeps, all without drawing attention to herself. She was everywhere and nowhere at once. A final alert, an unauthorized drone hovering above the hospital's roof. Claire's instincts sharpened. She knew it carried surveillance, perhaps even explosives. She assessed the trajectory, potential landing zones, and nearby personnel. She directed the operatives without hesitation. Evacuate roof access, neutralize aerial threat, maintain hospital perimeter, move silently. The drone responded to electronic countermeasures, then crash-landed harmlessly on a side street. No alarms had sounded, no staff panicked. All had moved according to the silent plan Claire had executed in real time. The hospital's chaos had reached its peak and receded under her calm orchestration. Every threat neutralized, every patient stabilized, every operative aligned. Her authority, invisible to the casual observer, had been absolute. Claire finally allowed herself a slow exhale, walking down the central corridor. Nurses, doctors, and paramedics moved past her, unaware of the full magnitude of her interventions. She did not seek acknowledgement. The operative team gave subtle nods, recognizing the quiet precision that had prevented disaster. In the final moments, Claire glanced at the storm outside, knowing more challenges would arise. But inside these walls, she had acted with precision, courage, and moral clarity. The hidden authority, the restraint, and the quiet sacrifice had ensured survival. She moved to the supply alcove, checked her watch, and prepared for the next shift. No spotlight, no praise. Just the steady pulse of a hospital maintained under invisible command. For those who had underestimated her, the events of the night would remain a puzzle. For Claire Mercer, it was just another day, another orchestration of chaos managed with quiet competence. And as the helicopter lights faded into the storm-dark horizon, the hospital resumed its rhythm. Claire stood briefly in the hallway, a silent sentinel, knowing that her moral and tactical authority had preserved life once again, without anyone ever fully realizing the scale of her power. The storm outside had eased to a dull drizzle. Inside, the hospital hummed with the quiet rhythm of recovery. The ER bays were cleared, monitors beeped steadily, and the operatives had melted back into their routine shadows. Claire Mercer moved through the corridors with her usual calm, observing, noting, but not announcing her authority. She passed the staff lounge. A few nurses whispered behind closed doors, casting glances toward her, some curiosity, some unease. None fully understood what had happened, only that something extraordinary had passed over the hospital that night. Claire made no comment. Her presence alone had already set the tone, calm, competent, in control. A young doctor approached hesitantly, carrying a clipboard. "Ma'am, the patient's from Trauma 3, everything stabilized." Claire nodded briefly. "Vitals normal, no complications, secure records, notify families." She didn't linger. There was no need for celebration, no need for recognition. The work was done. In the hallway, Evan, the quiet technician who had impressed her earlier with his restraint, gave her a subtle nod. It was acknowledgement without words, an unspoken respect between two people who understood order, discipline, and the cost of responsibility. Claire returned the nod. Small moments like this mattered more than public praise. Outside, emergency vehicles had returned to routine patrols, and the hum of the city reasserted itself. Claire paused at the window overlooking the loading bay, watching as crews loaded standard shipments, oblivious to the chaos narrowly avoided. Every action she had taken, every tactical decision had gone unnoticed by most, but the outcome spoke louder than any recognition ever could. Her phone buzzed quietly. A single message: "All clear, debrief tomorrow, you handled it flawlessly." No name, no unnecessary fanfare. Claire allowed herself the smallest smile, then slipped the phone back into her pocket. The acknowledgement existed, but it did not define her. In the supply alcove, she checked the equipment she had used, ensuring everything was in perfect order. The rifle case-like storage contained nothing dangerous, simply tools and devices she might need again, tools she had trained with silently for years. Responsibility, competence, preparation, these were her constants. She walked toward the staff elevators, passing colleagues now returning to ordinary duties. Casual conversation, coffee cups in hand, laughter lightly threading through the air. The hospital had returned to its normal rhythm, but the tension lingered faintly in the spaces Claire had occupied. She didn't explain it, couldn't. Some authority was meant to be felt, not announced. In the break room, a small cake sat on the counter, leftover from some forgotten celebration earlier in the day. Claire glanced at it, then moved past. There would be no indulgence tonight. Duty had its own quiet reward. At the entrance to the ER, she paused one last time. Outside, the sky was clearing, the city lights beginning to pierce the dark clouds. She could hear distant traffic, the soft echo of life continuing. Inside, her hospital remained safe, secure, and ordered, not because anyone had noticed, but because she had ensured it. And as she stepped into the elevator, disappearing from view, Claire Mercer left behind the remnants of a night where calm competence had outweighed chaos, where restraint had conquered impulsive danger, and where invisible authority had quietly saved lives. The hospital had survived, and those who doubted her would never know how close they had come. But for Claire, it was simply another day. Another day of living in plain sight while carrying the weight of unseen command, the responsibility of life in her hands, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had acted with precision when it mattered most. The city continued its rhythm, the storm passed, and somewhere beyond the hospital walls, the world moved on, unaware of the quiet force that had protected it. The hospital's night shift had dwindled to its smallest, quietest numbers. Only the essential staff remained, moving softly through the hallways as monitors beeped steadily in the background. The storm from earlier was a distant memory, leaving only damp streets and a faint, clean scent of rain. Claire Mercer walked slowly, methodically through the corridors. Her uniform was tidy, her posture calm, her eyes scanning, but never searching. No one approached her. No one needed to. The impression she left lingered quietly, like an echo that didn't require repetition. She paused at the nurse's station. The clutter of charts, half-drunk coffee cups, and scattered pens was unchanged. She didn't straighten it. It wasn't her space to tidy, not really. She was only passing through, a guardian unseen, her authority felt but unspoken. Evan, the technician who had quietly impressed her during the night's crisis, was finishing inventory. He looked up at her as she approached, eyes briefly meeting hers. A small, knowing smile passed between them, simple acknowledgement, no words necessary. Claire nodded once and continued on. Down the hall, the faint hum of the ER lights cast long shadows across the floor. Claire moved past beds that now held stable patients, the earlier chaos dissolved into routine vitals and quiet monitors. She stopped at a bay window overlooking the city, the hospital lights flickering softly in the distance. The world outside went on, unaware of the night's near disasters. A pager buzzed softly in her pocket. She ignored it. Not everything required immediate action. Not every call required her attention. Some things could wait. The night was almost hers, and she allowed herself a brief, measured breath, the first in hours. Passing the supply alcove, she checked her equipment once more. Everything was exactly as it should be. No traces, no mistakes, no loose ends. Discipline demanded it, not ego. She closed the case with a soft click, the sound small but resolute. Claire descended the stairwell instead of taking the elevator, the echo of her boots against concrete subdued. Each step was deliberate, precise, yet unremarkable. To any observer, she was simply another hospital worker leaving for the night. But in every movement, in every silent decision, there was experience, training, and authority, unseen but absolute. Outside, the city had begun to settle into early morning quiet. Streetlights reflected in wet pavement, cars moving slowly, people unaware of the night that had almost been lost. Claire paused, hands in her coat pockets, watching the soft mist curl along the streets. The quiet suited her. The world didn't need to know. She didn't seek applause. She only needed assurance that the work had been done correctly. Finally, she walked toward the staff exit, past the automated doors and into the cool night air. She felt the weight of the storm and its aftermath lift slightly from her shoulders. The hospital was safe. Lives had been protected, orders had been followed, discipline maintained, and in the subtle shadows of her absence everything would remain that way. Evan's figure appeared briefly in the glass behind her, watching silently. She gave a single wave, simple, unassuming, and disappeared down the street. No recognition, no headlines, no congratulations. Only the quiet certainty of duty fulfilled, the restrained satisfaction of competence executed without spectacle. The city slept, the hospital rested, and Claire Mercer, guardian, observer, invisible authority, walked alone through the streets, unnoticed but essential, a shadow that had kept the night intact. A soft wind rustled past, carrying away the tension and leaving calm in its wake. She didn't look back. The night belonged to everyone else now.